Hello, welcome. My name is Joe Scales, and today I'm talking to Alison Milbank and Tom O'Loughlin about exactly why it is they enjoy teaching theology to students like myself. So, Tom, why do you enjoy teaching?
Because there is an element in which understanding always operates as a conversation. And I go into a class thinking I know something about the subject, and in the actual act of thinking it out live in a classroom with an actual audience and the possibility of their questions, I actually discover new things. There's an old adage, I never know what I know until I teach it, and it's absolutely true. And it's one of the reasons why I so much like live classroom teaching, because I might go in to give a lecture on something that I've lectured on virtually every year of my academic career. And yet I go in and in the reality of trying to explain it afresh, I discover new things, and I watch people ask questions, and there's a certain pleasure in seeing people engage with the question. And so it's teaching is a creative activity. So it's pleasant. It's pleasant in a very different way to say just trying to solve a problem sitting at one's desk or going for a walk, and it's a very different communication thing to say talking to a colleague or writing.
Yes, and of course in my modules we're studying art or literary texts, and there's a sense in which the student's much more empowered, because, you know, we can both look at a poem, and okay, I may know more historically about its production than they do, or even more about its theology, but the very nature of that kind of medium means that we're much more on equal terms, and they could find something new in it that nobody's ever found before. And that's why I think students find those kind of modules quite refreshing. At least I hope you do, because you do them too, don't you? And of course, I also get my students, partly I learnt this teaching in America where it's much more common, to, in particular in my religion and fantasy module, where we're looking at how poets and story writers and also philosophers and theologians of the past have used those media in order to explore the nature of the supernatural, the relation of the natural and the supernatural, the basis of reality. So I get them to actually write stories where they try and stage a fantastic hesitation about a supernatural event, or I get them to explore the theology of imagination through a painting. And students do sometimes give me permission to keep their work, and I've got one right here. Now this may look quite unusual picture that we have here. Believe it or not, it's an attempt to think through Kant's productive imagination and his idea of the separation between the phenomena and the noumena, you'll have to take my word for that for the moment, with Tolkien's theology of the imagination in his essay on fairy stories. So I'm not going to explain it all in detail. You can work that out for yourself. But what I'm getting at is not how well my student can paint. It's not a kind of painting class, but how they can see how paint as a medium is a way of exploring philosophical and theological ideas, how they can think with it. And so I never know what they're going to come out with. One chap took a door that he bought from B&Q all the way around the campus and staged scenes to demonstrate the relation between the natural and the supernatural in a whole range of fantasy authors, for example. One girl did a dance sequence, which she put on YouTube for me, where she explored something to do with the nature of Dante's conception of sin. And I find I never know what I'm going to get out of students when they do that. And it's really, really exciting. You can't quite do that in church history.
No, you can't. But I'm always amazed at how you offer people a text and they discover completely new dimensions of their own life that are illuminated by the text. Like the text that I have found myself having to teach year in, year out for 30 years is the Didache. In some places, the Didache is just a little bit of background. It's in the background to the New Testament. But when I'm teaching, I actually am interested in it because precisely because it's low-level theology. It's to do with the nuts and bolts of how a group of disciples trying to express what it is to be a follower of Jesus. This is before even the name Christian has come along. And you get an insight into their nuts and bolts and the things that were bugging them and the things they thought were really important. So people know a vast amount about, they often know a vast amount about the first generations of Christians, mainly through reading the literary products that in the 4th century become part of the canon and create a thing called the New Testament. Here is a document, the Didache, which is contemporaneous with these early documents and indeed older than some of them, but isn't a preaching document. It's a rules and regulations document. It solves problems like what do we do about people who are loafing and taking our food and are not contributing. And suddenly their whole understanding of what the early disciples of Jesus were going through, it's almost like a light come on. So a text, and I don't know how many people over the years said to me, we're going to read this text. You're not going to give an obscure text like that. I remember once when I was teaching, I said, we've got to give 10 lectures. I'll give it on 10 lectures on the Didache. And I said, you wouldn't think anything about 10 lectures on a letter of St. Paul. Oh, but that, you see? In other words, the 4th century presuppositions coming in. And yet, precisely because this text is unknown and isn't famous and isn't in every Bible, this text can actually open up avenues and understanding. So that's something that I truly enjoy about teaching as well.
I have to say, I once taught your edition of the Didache with a group of ordinary church people, and they said it was really practical and contemporary.
Thank you. I'm glad to hear that.
Well, thank you. That was quite interesting. Just quickly, in a couple of sentences, what is possibly, if you can use this, the most interesting lecture you've given in terms of the student reaction to what you've said?
I tell my ghost story, and the students are riveted. I don't know whether they're traumatised at being told a ghost story, whether they can't believe that a lecturer could tell a story like that, but you can just feel the unease, and I found that quite exciting. It has an educational value, I hasten to add, telling this story.
I remember once I was giving a lecture on the impact of the Black Death on the you can't understand the 16th century Reformation concerns with death and salvation without understanding it as in some way linked to the late medieval concerns, which took on a very definite and very vicious form with the experience of the Black Death in 1347. And I remember going through and saying, let's imagine this is a parish community, and the proportions will be dead. And then I said, right, so I said, that's the number that will have survived to 1349, and we'll have to reconstruct the thing. So I started wondering, and I found two guys playing noughts and crosses, or some variant. I said, what are you up to? And he said, we were written out of the script at the beginning of the lecture. And it always warned me, students can take you just that little bit too literally.
Well, thank you very much for talking to me this afternoon. And I think that's everything. Thank you very much.